party people, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a layout for Cocoa Vanilla, and I have a different kind of design. I normally am not attracted to grid or geometric designs. I'm normally attracted to like free-flowing 12 by 12s where there's kind of no like real rhyme or reason and I'm just sticking things down. So for today I decided to challenge myself and to create a grid style. So I'm using the Unforgettable collection, and I pulled out a bunch of different pattern papers, and I cut a bunch of papers down to 4x4 squares and 2x2 squares. And there are the photos that I'm scrapbooking. It's some pictures of me and a few of my friends. We had done a hot yoga class the day of our nursing final, just to kind of like zen out before we went into our exam. And it was a black light class, so it's dark, and we got a few pictures in there with the black light and everything else going on. And so I have these two pictures of us. We all wore like white tops and black bottoms. I think they came out pretty cute. So I'm scrapping those photos. And the first thing I decided to do was put my what I'm considering my main photo down on foam, because I wanted it to be popped up off the page and to have some dimension. And this layout takes a few twists and turns before I'm finally in a direction where I'm happy with it and I can start embellishing. And I don't even know why I pulled out a ruler, because I had wanted to put everything at an angle anyway. So there's no way to like measure a straight line because I'm just putting things at an angle. So I put my first piece down, and then I start building my patchwork grid background. And so the first thing I did was I started just using that photo as a template, right? So I put that photo down first, and then I put a piece of cardstock, and I put my next photo down, and I'm building my pattern from here. So you see I'm just adding the 4x4 squares and the 2x2 squares, and I'm varying the 4x4 with the 2x2 just because I think it adds a little bit of interest to the background. Also, when I picked papers for this, I picked papers that had similar tones and that weren't super busy. So one paper is that fun floral that has the teal and the orange, but the rest of the papers are either like a black and white spot or a black and white pattern or like a solid pink, because I just didn't want to have too much color going on, because then when it came down to embellishing, I think the layout was just going to become a bit busy. So I get pretty far in building this design before I realize I actually don't like it the way it is, and I end up taking it all off, because what I decided I wanted to do is I wanted it to be kind of a brick layered grid. Like I didn't like how perfect they looked right on top of each other. So I pulled them all off. I put some foam behind my second photo because I liked the way that looked. And you see I kind of staggered. I put the second photo down kind of staggered, so now they're not going to be in a perfect grid. And then I go ahead and stick all of my papers down again, trying to remember where each paper went, but just again recreating the brick pattern so that now they're not so they're staggered pretty much, so they're not sitting perfectly on top of each other. And when it's all put together, I think you'll see what I mean, but I think it just looks so much more visually interesting and appealing this way than if I hadn't layered it. So I went ahead and then again stuck down all my papers. And like I was saying, when you want to do something like this, I think it would work in a monochromatic design. So you see there's a lot of pink on this page, or mostly black and white. But I think if you go and start adding too many different pattern papers to your grid, you run the risk of it becoming really busy. Also, I like embellishing, which is going to make it busy to begin with. So I was really hesitant to mix in a bunch of papers on the background and then not be able to embellish it because it would just be, really busy. Also, I stuck to, I think, 4 pattern papers and just kept repeating it. So that was the other thing I'd recommend. If you decide to do something like this, pick a few papers and then just repeat those papers. Like, you don't want to use every paper in the collection if you're doing a patchwork design like this. I think 4 is a good number. I think I used 4 papers. Yeah, I used 4 papers. So 4 is a good number, 5 maybe, but I wouldn't go like sticking 10 papers down to this background because you're just, again, running the risk of it becoming super busy. And if you like busy layouts, sure, I like busy layouts too, but you also kind of have to contain the busyness so that they're not so visually distracting that you lose the photo, because that's what we're scrapbooking, right? We're scrapbooking photos, and the embellishments are just accents to the story that we're telling. So I finally got all my bits and pieces stuck down, and I have my whole patchwork. And every now and then I had to take this into my paper trimmer and trim off the excess papers for two reasons. One, I don't want to waste paper. So if I could trim off the excess papers and use them in other places where I just needed a tiny corner, that's what I did. 3, it just becomes really unwieldy if you have papers hanging off of every single edge to then figure out how to trim them down. I already struggled with trying to get these papers when they were like 15 inches to fit in my 12-inch paper trimmer. So I think the easiest way to do this would be to trim side by side. So every time I had like 2 corners, I would take it into my paper trimmer and trim it down. So now that I have my background done, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my title. I knew I wanted to use those scripty alphas, but I didn't like them completely as a title, so I decided to pull out my Sizzix Sidekick and my dies and cut out a title of my own. Now, in hindsight, I wouldn't have used this wood grain paper because it does get lost a lot on my background. I thought the wood grain was dark enough that you would still see it against all those funky patterns. In hindsight, I would have just used solid black cardstock, but again, I thought you'd be able to see it, and you can see it in person, but in pictures and on the video, it definitely gets washed out. So definitely would have used a darker cardstock if I do this again. But I cut out Smile and Glow so that my title is now Smile, Bloom, Glow. Just because we were taking pictures in a black light, and I thought that was a pretty clever title. So now I'm working on embellishing my page. From here, all the hard work's done. We're just going to go ahead and start adding good stuff. So there's cut apart sheets in the 6x8 paper pad. So I cut apart the cut apart sheet, and that's going to be the basis for my embellishing, because my thought process for embellishing this layout was just to create a few clusters on the bigger squares, like wherever there was a lot of space. I wouldn't necessarily cluster on the 2x2s, but those 4x4 squares, wherever there was a bunch of space, my plan was to put clusters on those squares. So I pulled out everything I have left from the Unforgettable collection. I still have a fair bit. I have some ephemera, I have some flare, I have some enamel dots, I have the clear sticker. So I pull it all out, and now I'm working on building clusters. So first I build that cluster on that big pink square, and again, I'm just mixing up bits and pieces. So I have a half a cardstock frame wreath, I think, because I cut everything in half. So I have half of that. I layered one of the cut apart pieces over it, added some flowers, added a phrase sticker from the accessory sheet, and then moved on to another square. And this one I layered 2 circles, again, added a flower, added a phrase with words, because that's just how I like to do clusters. I like to start with a big shape. I typically start with a tag, because tags are just an easier shape for me to work with. So I like to start with a big shape. Here I'm using the cut aparts to serve as the tag, but it does the same thing. And then I add some flowers or some sort of like shaped embellishment. So for this one I added circles, and then I add a word. And that is how I build a cluster. I say this all the time. When you're scrapbooking, use a formula. If you figure out a formula, then everything you're doing becomes so much easier. So the formula I'm using, that I always use, is a big shape, like a tag or some sort of shape like that, and then a shaped embellishment, so like a flower or a circle, and then a phrase. And that's it. And that makes it super easy to repeat this over and over. And so I do the same thing. Here I decide to stick down my title because I want to make sure that I'm not super embellishing and I run out of room for my title. And I decided to put my title straight, like not at the angle like everything else is, because I think that would help it stand out more. And here's what I mean about the wood grain letters getting lost on that background. I thought they would stand out. They kind of don't. I actually, after I took the pictures and I stared at this layout for a few days, I went back and I took a pen and I outlined the letters really messily, and so you can see them a lot better. But I did that a few days later. And guys, if you make a layout and you're staring at it and it's not your favorite, like, don't be afraid to go back and just modify things until it like suits you, because it's your page, so who's gonna stop you, right? So I loved the cut apart, the die cuts, and I liked the title, but I was just losing my letters. So I just took a really fine tipped pen and I went back and outlined the letters, and now I can see them again, which is exactly why I put them on the page, so I can see them. All right, so I decided to just do something really, really minimal with my photo, not embellishing too much. I added a flower, added a piece of flare, and that's my photo embellished. Because there's so many embellishments on the rest of the page, there's no reason to cover the photo in stickers and flowers. So then in the last bottom piece, that really big square on the bottom, same thing, I added some stems and a flower, layered over the cut apart on top. And this time I put the cut apart on top because it had words and I didn't want to lose the sentiment in the words. And then same thing, added a banner with a phrase. So you guys, you see I'm repeating the same formula on each of these clusters I make, and then I added a flower on top. Once you have your formula, it becomes super easy to do this and to replicate it. I added a tiny word stickers, what I'm used to calling them, but it's a phrase sticker from the accessory sheet to my top photo, just so that could have a tiny bit of embellishing. And I think I go in to add a small flower. Like I pick up a bunch of bigger flowers and I eventually find a small flower and put that up there. So now I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with these bottom two spaces because they're not like a full-size square. So I just got to be smart about what I put there. So I had a small square cut apart. I layered that with a ticket from the die cut sheet, and then I added some of those black foam stickers that was on the same pack that my title was made out of, just because I wanted to reintegrate. I wanted to add that black somewhere else on the page. It's just so stark where my title is. So I find that if you're introducing, I say this all the time, if you're introducing a new color and a new texture, the only way to make it blend in is to repeat it. So just add it in a few more places. So I added a foam heart to the top of my page. And then I added some of these foam kind of like bannery looking stickers to the bottom of my page, and now it's reproduced. And then I add a camera and another word phrase to this bottom corner where there's like not much space. So now I'm trying to be really smart about what embellishments I use just because there's not much space. So I think I take I take a cardstock sticker, layer a camera over it. And I'm covering the words in the cardstock sticker, but you can still tell that it says photo of the day. I add a flower, and then I think I go ahead and add, one more tiny phrase sticker. All these clusters are exactly the same. And then from here, I think I pull out some enamel dots, if I'm not mistaken. I think I eventually pull out some enamel dots, and yes, I do. Pull out some enamel dots and scatter them around the page, because you know what enamel dots are like the sprinkles on the cake. Once the cake is fully baked and frosted, I like to just sprinkle on some enamel dots across the page just to add one more little bit of texture and dimension. And after I add my enamel dots, I pull out the clear stickers. And I normally don't reach for the clear stickers. There's just an embellishment that I struggle with, but I've started figuring out how to use them on my page, which is to use them as the very last thing. So I find that if I pull out the clear stickers at the end, when I'm finished embellishing, finishing my page, and then I just scatter them in a few places the same way I would scatter enamel dots, they add a really fun see-through element and texture to the background. So I've been really enjoying pulling out my clear stickers and using them on pages. So I add a butterfly and a flower and just a few clear stickers across the page. I add a few clear hearts, and that calls this one done. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to head to the Cocoa Vanilla blog to see pictures and to kind of see the products that I use for this page. Please like, comment, subscribe if you're so inclined. Let me know what you're up to, and I hope you guys are doing well. I hope your families are well. Until next time, keep it crafty and have the best day, and I will see you around. Bye!